The GOP, it's not your father's Republican Party. Yes, that's something we've said many times, and it's not just me. I've had Republicans like Chris Shays, representative from Connecticut. I've had other Republicans here, Christy Todd Whitman, former governor of New Jersey, who Andrew's going to be sitting down with tomorrow. She said the same thing. Longtime Republicans now on the outside say they don't recognize the party anymore, for good or for bad. But now the man who is a heartbeat from the Oval Office, and obviously with the political axe to grind, he's saying it too. And Andrew, he's pointing out specifically that it's not just some giant shift. It's a couple particular people who the rest are afraid of.
And he says that that's coming from people who he's talking to who are Republican senators as well. But the first set of comments came during Vice President Joe Biden's recent appearance at a fundraiser for the Democratic Senate candidate in Massachusetts. Here's his full quote. "This is not your father's Republican Party. It really is a fundamentally different party. There's never been as much distance, at least since I've been alive, distance between where the mainstream of the Republican Congressional Party is and the Democratic Party is. It's a chasm. It's a gigantic chasm." And as proof, Biden recalled what he says 9 Republican senators told him when he asked for their votes on background checks in April. That they could not vote yes, he said, because they feared the wrath of freshman senators Rand Paul and Ted Cruz. Asked Biden, quote, "Have you ever seen a time when 2 freshman senators are able to cower the bulk of the Republican Party in the Senate? That is not hyperbole." And then, as if on cue, one of the 2 senators Biden called out took to Twitter showing off the chasms between the old and new GOPs and between the new GOP and the President of the United States. Ted Cruz tweeting, quote, "If supporting real immigration reform, not path to citizenship, is Obama-phobia, guilty as charged." Retweet if you're a fellow Obama-phobic. And Rich, hard to think if you go back to the days of the 80s or the 70s that you would have somebody calling themselves a Carter-phobic or even a Clinton-phobic. It's a different breed.
You know, just I'm curious because you know the challenges in New York for candidate recruitment, right? And we talked a lot of times, Ted Cruz, why is he coming to New York to be the poster child for the state, to be the keynote speaker at the state Republican Party? But I can name U.S. senators who I might disagree with, but I always respected, like the Dick Lugers of the world and stuff like that. Or just take Delaware. I mean, Castle is a good guy with a good record. He's regarded well within Republican circles, always was. And then you had a woman out of nowhere who just said the word Tea Party, forget that she was a witch or whatever, okay? O'Donnell. But my point is, how is that good for the party? That the new brand of somebody whose first thing they'll say is they hate the president, everything he stands for, they're basically the new standard to get through a primary. And good people like, I can go through the whole litany, a lot of names people at home don't even know, but just take the Delaware case. That can't help the party. It's got to narrow the base.
There is one reason, and one reason only, why Joe Biden singled out Ted Cruz and Rand Paul, because they undercut 2 of the Democrats' biggest traditional bases, Hispanics and young voters.
No,
and they both,
please.
Richard,
they
I'm both attract.
Jess, I immensely respect you, but here is where I'm putting hep weeders on. After November, I'll tell you why, and then you tell me if I'm wrong. After November, the National Republican Party chairman did a postmortem, and he says, we have a huge problem, our base is too small. We're a party of old white men. We need to get, time out, we need to get Latino voters. They're not voting for us. And he says we have to change what we're doing. And if Ted Cruz now is the poster child for this, give me a break.
Give me a break. He is lauded by Hispanics. He has an immensely impressive resume. They look up to him and his leadership, and he's doing a ton of outreach across the entire country, doing Hispanic outreach for the party. So what do you think?
Brother Dominic will help you on this one. Jessica is extremely good at what she does, but right now she can't sell this one.
I'm getting burned.
You don't think that statement is not politically motivated?
Of course it is.
Give me a break. You guys are being so naive.
Of course it is.
If
but do you really think
that statement is not
really
completely
think that there weren't
motivated?
more than a handful of Republican senators who would have voted for a background check, supported a background check, which 3/4 of the NRA members and 90% of Americans got behind because they weren't afraid of getting primaried by the Tea Party?
It has.
Yes
you think
or no?
Ted Cruz and Rand Paul control the whole party. It's people are they're looking for leadership, and they look to those two individuals because they stand for something. So
Wait, you're saying Latinos look to Ted Cruz, Senator Cruz?
Yes.
Oh,
I guarantee you 9 out of 10 Latinos couldn't even name Ted Cruz.
Ted Cruz. They are breaking barriers when it comes to doing Hispanic outreach with the party.
Cruz, forget, by the way, New Yorkers out there and anybody out in Jersey watching, he's the guy who not voted once but twice against getting Sandy aid for us. But time out. Let's leave that for another day. Ted Cruz does not support the immigration reform package that overwhelming Latinos are polling in support of. He is not speaking in the interest, at least, of that demographic as to what they want. So how he is the poster child and they're putting up photos of Ted Cruz in the living room, give me a break.
He's not the only one. And you're viewing this in a prism of a single vote or in the Northeast of New York and New Jersey. You have to go beyond that.
Andrew, this guy's crazy, isn't he?
Ted Cruz?
Yeah.
I'm not going to say that he's crazy. He's very conservative. Very conservative.
He has said some stuff, Mr. Texas, that you're just like,
I don't want to call him crazy.
I will, Richard, no doubt about it.
Let's
no
say
doubt
what we say in the
about
green
it.
room.
You guys are in a bubble of New
Absolutely
York
nuts.
State. You're in a
Absolutely
bubble.
nuts. And I don't think he'll be in the Senate very long.
I will say this. One of the reasons why Biden singled those two out, whether that conversation that he said actually happened or not, Rand Paul is leading the presidential field in the last poll in Michigan.
Thank you
And
very much.
But
That
he's
proves my
been in
point.
Congress 4 months, or I'm sorry, he's been in Congress since 2010. So he's been in Congress 2 years in the Senate, and he's had a couple of moments where he's popped up and become because he says incredibly divisive, incredibly hyperbolic things.
The fact that Dominic, if certain restaurants today didn't want to let Dominic sit at the same table with the three of us, he thinks that's okay. He thinks he did.
But that's how shallow the bench is in the Republican Party right now. It takes that little to get to the front of the field, and that's why you have, I think, Republican lawmakers who don't want to get on the wrong side of those two guys because then they're hurting their own PR and they're subjecting themselves to a primary. To me, that's demonstrative of how little support for mainstream GOP ideology there seems to be among electeds in Washington right now who are in the Republican Party.
Rand Paul is in a different category because he's more of a libertarian, obviously. So he has been able to attract a huge swath of young people that were mostly politically apathetic. And so that he's a real force, and that's why the Democrats are afraid of him.
Here's my question to you. New York State, let's just use New York. Jacob Javits was the senator here. He couldn't even get on the ballot nowadays, okay? He was liberal, not even moderate. He was a liberal Republican, okay?
Reagan couldn't.
Ronald Reagan could. But if you're trying to get Republicans elected, forget what Democrats think. Forget about what Joe Biden has to say. If your only job is to get Republicans elected nationally and then to statewide stuff in the non-reddest of states, you're trying to find somebody that's got appeal that goes beyond just the primary Republican base.
They are two examples that do go beyond the primary Republican base. They attract young voters and they attract Hispanics. That's exactly why they're so appealing right now.
You cannot think that Rand Paul, you're not rooting for this guy to be the 2016.
Listen, I'm not, because personally, my philosophy doesn't agree with everything that he does.
How about your party?
But
you can do better than him.
My feeling is that the party needs to embrace be a bigger tent, and that involves there has to be a place for people like Rand Paul, and there has to be a place for more moderate Republicans.
But those guys are pushing out anybody.
That is our biggest challenge
right now.
But it's
people who are on the extreme edge of the party that seem to have the popularity of the party's voters right now, whereas on the Democratic side, the extreme left in no way seems to have their hands on the throttle of the Democratic Party.
Forget about the popularity. They're scaring the you-know-what out of the guys in the middle from crossing them. And that's more important than being popular or anything else.
And the Democrats, for that matter. So
I don't know. I just don't see how long-term this is a good strategy for the party. You guys got to figure out a way to freeze these guys out. And if you can't, they're going to keep dragging you to an unelectable national position. He'll still win in Kentucky. The other guy will still win in Texas. I'm not saying they won't.
I don't think it's a question of freezing them out. I think it's a question of, like you were saying before, Dominic, if you're not with me, you're against me. That mentality needs to change. Ronald Reagan used to say, Ed Koch has said, you don't need to agree with everyone on 100% of the issues. And if you don't, if it's 8 out of 10 or 7 out of 10, that doesn't make you
so
the
how do you
enemy.
change that? Because that's clearly not where the party is right now.
Well, I think we're working towards that. There's many in the party that are trying to work towards that.
Okay. Well, we come back. We're going to be talking about an issue that really doesn't fall into political lines, Republican, Democrat. This has to do with how much privacy we're willing to give up for protection, or at least the argument of protection. When we come back, the head of the National Security Agency, he faced a grilling today on Capitol Hill. Meanwhile, a lot of questions remain about how much lawmakers actually knew about these programs before the leak. We're going to get into who knew what and where we go from here after this.